Voilà, ce petit mot fait un peu le tour. Maintenant, je ne vais pas garder plus longtemps la parole. Je me réjouis de passer à notre première keynote, donc, qui va me permettre d'accueillir ici Sally Bushell, qui ne doit pas être très très loin. Sally Bushell, qui est professeure de littérature romantique et victorienne et co-directrice du Wordsworth Center au département de littérature anglaise et d'écriture créative de l'Université de Lancaster. Ses recherches actuelles portent sur la modélisation du lieu et de l'espace dans la littérature. Elle est également à l'initiative du projet Litcraft. Elle est partenaire aussi de notre université au travers du partenariat avec Lancaster et elle va nous parler de mapping, reading, playing, literary mapping avec Minecraft. Merci beaucoup Sally, bienvenue.
Merci Isaac. Je dois parler en anglais parce que je n'ai pas les mots spécifiques. Désolé. Okay, so my talk today is about connecting literature using Minecraft in relation to literary texts and reading. I didn't put on the slide that I'm actually a literary scholar, so actually I'm not in DH and I'm not in education, but I'm doing both. So this is a good thing, I think. I think it's actually really important for digital humanities that scholars from their own specific discipline feed into it and redesign it for what we need. Is that okay, the sound?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, okay. So today I'm mainly going to be talking about Litcraft and also another project that I'm just working on. So part one is very quick, many pictures, lots to look at, and I'm going to zip through them quite quickly. So Litcraft and multimodal reading, and then a kind of an alternative model in a way that's emerged from that as well. So Litcraft was what we call Impact in the UK, outreach project, which in any funded project, even high research, pure research, we also have to have impact, which I think is very good. And Litcraft was the educational part of the major project, so I was leading on both these projects. And the main project was called Chronotopic Cartographies, which is about mapping literary time space and finding ways to generate visualizations out of literary texts. So have a look at that if you're bored. Go off and have a look at that. But I'm not talking about the main project today. The main aims of Litcraft were to have an impact on society by changing attitudes towards literary culture and heritage, to work with schools in the first instance, but also libraries, to re-engage children with literary classics and with reading, motivate reading actually, very much what you were talking about, Pierre, as you'll see, to experience literary worlds in new ways by connecting reading and actually cognitive imagination through reading with in-game experience. And for us also to make it very user-friendly for teachers, because we're also trying to get DH into schools, and particularly in literary studies, this is very rare, actually, to use DH in literary studies. So we built 3 literary island builds initially. Our first build was Treasure Island, Robert Louis Stevenson. The second build was Kensuke's Kingdom, which is a modern book by a living author, Michael Morpurgo. But also an island narrative. And the third build is like a double build, which moves between Robinson Crusoe and Swiss Family Robinson. So the idea was very simple. It was to take a literary text that has a map at the front of it, because my primary research area is in literary mapping, and to build an accurate scale model of that map in Minecraft, as you can see. By doing this, it means you can use the map outside the text to negotiate within the Minecraft world, the map outside, and also the text outside. So we're linking reading the text, reading the map, and experiencing that same world in Minecraft. Very briefly, in case you don't know anything about Minecraft, Minecraft was invented in 2011. It has 140 million users. many of which are aged 8 to 12. And so it's a very useful program to take into schools because most children already are very familiar with it and really enjoy it. You can play in 2 modes in Minecraft. So you can play survival mode, which is more like a standard gaming mode, I guess, where you have to acquire everything you need to survive. You start with nothing. If you want an axe, you have to chop a tree down and make an axe and so on. And monsters come out at night. But you can also play in creative mode, and then you're given everything that you need, all of those blocks, instead of having to find them, they're given to you, and so you can just build whatever you want in that world. And obviously this lends itself actually very strongly to educational use. It's also very environmental, so you get great sort of landscapes, which I really like. So at the heart of Litcraft is this, what I would call like a virtuous circle that moves between reading the text, always starts with the text outside the game world. Then you go in, you immerse yourself within the game world, corresponding to the text, and then coming back out and maybe writing or reading about it. So again, I think this really picks up on what Pierre was saying, although I just stumbled across this model, but actually exactly that you enter it and you come out of it, and this is very effective. In educational terms, we have like a framework around the build. So we make the build, which has a lot of detail within it that corresponds directly to the narrative and the text. And there's a framework around it as well of pre-reading tasks, comprehension. Then you go in game. Sorry, stop doing that. Move this down a bit. Then you go in the game and you undertake a task corresponding to the narrative, and then you come back out and do a follow-up task of some sort. So we give booklets and lesson plans all free to teachers as well with the game build. So Treasure Island was our first build. We did this very, very speculatively, experimentally. I just made it. I just thought, oh, let's just do this and see what happens. It went down very, very well. But when we took it into schools, teachers would say, you know, I can immediately think of children who would like this, but they are reluctant readers, what they call reluctant readers, which actually often meant low ability readers. And Treasure Island is quite a difficult text. It's quite a long text. It's quite difficult language. And so we then did the second build for Kensuke's Kingdom, which is much simpler and much more compressed, although it's also a really good island narrative. So as you can see, when you look across the 2 texts, you can see that there's many more tasks linked to the other text than Treasure Island. Still the same structure pertains. So for example, the first task there in Treasure Island says, how my shore adventure began. In the story, the boy Jim sneaks ashore in the boat, which he shouldn't do. Then he jumps out and he runs all over the island. He has various adventures. So, you know, you would pre-read, you would kind of talk this through with the class. What do we think of Jim's character? You know, how he behaves, would you do that? So on and so forth. Then you go into the game. In the game world, the first task is a scavenger hunt, where again, the child then, or the children, because they work in pairs, run all over the island and explore it. And so they effectively, it's imitative within the Minecraft world of what is happening in the narrative. And then you come back out and maybe do some follow-up writing work. So within the build, we also have a starting point, which is kind of beacon and chests, where you can hold things in the chest. And a very simple structure, you go to the chest for the first session. There's a book in the chest, children take it out, read it, it tells them exactly what to do. This is just some clips from the Treasure Island build of the ship with a creeper face on it. Yes, and so the second build we made Kensuke's Kingdom because it was shorter, simpler, much more accessible for reluctant readers and low ability readers. And this is a great narrative. If you haven't read it, I recommend it very strongly. So a British boy, Michael, gets washed up, he gets washed overboard and onto this island. And it says my end at the bottom. He's stuck in the bottom end, and already on the island is a Japanese man, Kensuke. And at first, you know, they stay apart, and then gradually they kind of come together and learn together. And it's very emotive. It's a really good text. So again, the same structure, basically reading and writing in-game. And this is just to show you how you can read in-game what to do. So the first task is finding, using the map from the front of Kensuke's kingdom, move around the island to find 4 beacons and do what you need to do in the text. Again, just to give you an idea of the way the tasks work. So again, you'd have sort of pre-reading, thinking about what's happening in the narrative, then a focused comprehension, which in this case is about their daily life together, Michael and Kensuke. So you'd read and think about that. And then in-game, again, the children kind of reenact what happens to Michael. Eat some fresh food. It tells you, do these things. Catch at least 5 different kinds of fish. Go for a swim. And then also in this activity, there's a second book to write in-game as well, an ideas book. And it says, write about each activity, walking the dog, and so on and so on. So this was very popular, actually, this activity with children. And again, very empathetic, because they're kind of thinking about what it's like to be in that position. So this is another task, message in a bottle. Imagine you were shipwrecked. What message would you write? And these are some examples from taking it into the classroom of children doing that. And we also had 2 museum builds as well, which used a real-world base. So all the islands are just islands. We can create them in a sea. But the museum builds, we have generated like an accurate map of the Lake District using the Ordnance Survey in Minecraft, and then put Wordsworth's house, the poet Wordsworth, in that landscape and all kinds of activities. And 7 Stories is like the centre of Newcastle, so we had a map of Newcastle. We generated the imaginative space out of the kind of real-world map. So a few things came out of this for us initially, very clearly. First, that it had a very positive effect on empathy with all children of all genders registering this. Secondly, maybe the most effective element was the motivation to read. It definitely increased motivation to read. It was particularly effective with low ability and reluctant readers. It helped with transition from primary to secondary, which in the UK is year 6 to year 7. And also we noticed that children kind of wanted to respond creatively very quickly. So they would finish, if they finished doing the project, then they would start to say, what other books could I use? Or could I make a Minecraft world of this? And actually some children in the year 7 reluctant reader groups went off and like built their own world for Holes, which is another great book. So a couple of comments from the children that show this kind of loop, the loop working. It made me wonder what was happening next. Being in the world made you think about what was going to happen. And the final quote, carry on playing, I needed to read the next part of the book. So in advance, I would have thought, oh, they'll just want to get into the game. They won't necessarily read, they'll just read quickly to get into the game world. That's what I would have predicted. But that really didn't happen. So this is very surprising and supports that point about coming out and going back in. This coming out, going back in, very effective. And they absolutely wanted to read to get onto the next task in the game. So this worked very well. I just like this picture because the girls were in this sort of traditional costume at the Wordsworth Trust, 19th century, but playing on the iPads. So it's a nice picture. Empathy, again, very, very strong. When I played the game, I understood more of the book, how hard it was for him to be away from his family. These are direct quotes. So this was the first phase of LitCraft, part of another project. But 2 things happened. One, it actually got too big, so I ended up running 2 projects instead of 1, which was a bit of a nightmare. But also, it didn't have its own funding. This was another problem, because it was only meant to be like a little bit of another project. So now I've redesigned it to try and get research funding to kind of look more at what's happening whilst the children read and move across the gaming environment. So in this bid, which we're just waiting and hoping that we get, we take the book Wolf Brother, which has, again, a map of kind of an ancient world, and link it to the game. Same thing. But this time, I'm going to build like the base world still in great detail, but leave kind of pockets within it for the children to co-create. So it does the same thing, but it gives them more investment in, they sort of make the build themselves, or parts of the build themselves, which also means each build that they make will be unique. So what we'll be exploring in this project is, what is actually happening, what is going on in children's minds when they're undertaking these multimodal reading. For me, the most interesting element is this idea of double immersion. So you read one way yourself individually, and you generate a degree of an internalized map, or you have a sense of the text in your own mind. Then you go into the game, and it's different. It's a different version of that. Well, actually, then you read the map. That's a different version. Then you go into the game, and you experience it differently. In Litcraft co-creation, then children will also be moving from reading as an individual to a shared experience. So they use the resource in pairs on iPads, and they'll be working together to make the build and so on. So I think this is very interesting in relation to reluctant reading or low ability reading, because one might postulate that low ability readers do not ever achieve a flow state. I think this is quite possible. So they don't fully visualize, and that this is why they never get that intrinsic motivation to read. But what happens when they go into the Minecraft world, it kind of does that by proxy. It does it indirectly for them. And in a shared, so you read alone, maybe you don't really get it, you don't really like it. But then you go into the world, you have your own experience within exactly the world of the text, but with someone else, then you come back. So I'm very interested in this move from different forms, but also individual visualization, cognition, to a kind of shared experience. And again, what we'll be exploring is conceptual blending, which is a kind of theory of text that states exactly that we can merge these different textual and spatial experiences. I guess you could call it reading by stealth. It's kind of cheating, again, using the text. The children will have to read the text very closely to make the detailed build. But I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that's fine. What's wrong with that? And also what we'll be doing in this project is filming the children as they use the resource, and then analysing the data that comes out of that. So we should also see kind of new literacies emerging in the classroom from this multimodal reading experience. Okay, so that was the main focus of my talk today, but I just wanted to show you something that I've also just put in, another bid that I've just put in, for a kind of immersive literary experience. And again, this maybe goes back to what Pierre was raising a bit in terms of games, or what we call a game, or gamification. So obviously at a macro level, we have this debate between narratology and ludology, if you like. And Michalis Kokonis says, on the one hand, the so-called narratologists approach games for their narrative dimension. On the other hand, the ludologists focus attention on the mechanics of games and reject an analysis of computer names as narratives. I think this is very characteristic of any newly emerging field. It always wants to define itself against whatever went before it. But I think there's absolutely no need to do that. I can't see any need to do that. Why can't we have a plurality? There should be a plurality of different ways of engaging with texts and games. At one extreme is very narratological, at the other it's very ludological. Why not do that? So I would definitely go with that. At the same time, I think what I'm doing, I never say what I'm doing is gaming. I don't think it is gaming. And so I'm calling it at the moment experiential reading. I think it's like using gaming platforms to explore literature in new ways and have different kinds of literary experience. So it's not really gaming and it's not really reading. It's something between those two. A model that has emerged out of narratology is called story world theory. And again, this is, I think, very interesting because it maps directly onto what is happening in multimodal reading. And it focuses on the immersive power of the story, the world-creating power of narrative, its ability to transport interpreters from the here and now. So this, and again, this idea of story world, it's not actually, so again, it takes it sort of in the middle between narratology and ludology, I think, because it's about the immersive experience. So this, for me, is quite a helpful way to think about what I'm doing. So the final thing I just show you today, which we've just put in for, is hopefully a large steampunk Sherlock Holmes build. And for this, we're going to use Charles Booth. He's a kind of rich man, philanthropist in London in the 1890s, and he mapped London socially in different colors. So he has like 7 different colors on his map. And you can see it's very, very detailed. You can see how detailed the map is. So like from rich to poor / criminal on his map. And so we're going to use this massive, very detailed map to create a huge Minecraft world in Victorian London with a partner. I'm not going to do all of that. Blockworks, who are very prestigious Minecraft designer. So they're going to build the macro map, and then we're going to embed literary narratives within that in a kind of a collaborative knowledge exchange project. So for example, this is Holmes's study. We can do a very, very detailed build of the study and kind of embed different narrative elements. We also have an educational build for this, which is for The Sign of Four, which is a novel by Conan Doyle, which deals with imperialism. And in that way, we can have the base world in London, and then you can go through a portal in Minecraft to the fort at Agra, where various, not very reputable things occur by the British on the poor natives, of course. So here, just to conclude, what do I mean by this experiential reading? I think, it's about it's not exactly gaming, it's embedding the literary within a game world. I want different uses of that world, so you could just wander around the entire build, you could climb buildings and see the whole of London, and you might randomly come across different elements of the narrative. You can undertake a more focused kind of quest relating to particular stories, which we will then kind of map out and kind of light out across the text. But we'll have like writing, quotations on the wall, kind of graffiti from the text and stuff like this. And then there'll also be a more structured build for the GCSE level text. So we're also using Minecraft with 15 to 16-year-olds as well for the first time here. I think that's it. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't speak too quickly. Okay.